I'd like to start by welcoming everybody, of course, to discuss, the skills basically that will shape tomorrow's workplaces. It's a hot topic these days with COVID-19. A lot of people losing jobs or thinking about what's next for them. There's talk, of course, of hard skills, soft skills, some that are more important than others, some that are becoming obsolete or irrelevant, and of course, Industry 4.0 skills. A lot of talk going on about the need for reskilling and upskilling and whose responsibility this should be. Should it be the employer's responsibility or the employee? But one thing is for sure, we definitely need to invest in ourselves to continue to thrive and grow amidst these constantly changing circumstances. It's a very timely topic, and we have two amazing speakers here to join us with their experience to talk about this. We have Simone Lawrence. Simone has over 20 years of experience developing people, leading HR, L&D, operations, sales, and multiple other functions across a variety of industries from corporate and NGO sectors. She's qualified as a workplace educator in Australia. She's a certified practitioner as an executive coach with the European Mentoring and Coaching Council and the International Coaching Federation. She's a Marshall Goldsmith stakeholder-centered executive coach, a global leader of the future 360 assessor, DISC Compass practitioner, and NLP practitioner. So as an executive coach and people developer, Simone brings her contagious positivity, I assure you that, her leadership experience and her passion for developing people to work with people's potential and build optimal personal and professional impact. So I'd like to welcome you, of course, here today, Simone. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Sama.
Thank you. We also have Souha with us, Souha Dalloul. Souha is a marketing professional with over 14 years of experience across the GCC in online and offline marketing strategy and implementation. She started her career with a year-long internship at Microsoft, where her passion for technology and its positive utilization for society came to life through marketing campaigns for B2B and B2C stakeholders. Since then, Souha has held multiple positions in advertising, PR, events, digital integration, social and content strategy at agency and client-side brands. Today, Souha focuses on working with brands to achieve integration between online and offline marketing, develop and execute content and social media strategies, create new revenue streams, optimize online presence and e-commerce channels. So thank you so much, ladies, for being with us here today. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I know there's a lot to be said about this topic. So without further ado, I'd like to leave you to it. I would just like to highlight that for the attendees, you can share your questions with us throughout the session as of now by using the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. Or if you'd prefer to speak, I can unmute your microphone if you click on the raise your hand button at the bottom. So I shall hand over now to Souha.
Thanks a lot, Samar, for having us both. It's a pleasure to be with you on this webinar, and thank you for selecting this topic. It is indeed very important, especially as markets around the region and globally open up. There's been a lot of disruption in the last 3 months, not just on the health level from a healthcare point of view, but also on terms of jobs and economies and the entire situation. I'd just like to start with a little bit of a personal story. I did start in technology, Microsoft as a technology company, but I did learn through that one-year internship the importance of technology and the role it plays in our lives and in our work and in everything. And the most important part from that internship is to really overcome any stigma with related to technology or adoption of technology, and to be able to discern what to adopt and proper usage and mindful and responsible usage of that. So after that, I did start my career as a advertising or ad woman and marketeer in a very traditional marketing environment where technology or social media really didn't take center stage. I did graduate from a very reputable university in the region, and all of that. But the moment I joined the workforce, regardless if it was tech driven or not, I noticed that there was really a skill set gap. We call it soft skills or hard skills, but there was really a massive experiential gap on both of those terms. So it takes quite a while at that point, 14 years ago, to really just catch up and just start adding value with the employer. But from then on, I really went challenge after challenge, and I came to Dubai about 10 years ago, where everything just grew horizontally and vertically. And the company that I was in at the time as an agency was really digital first. I keep emphasizing this point because it's important for the purpose of our webinars and our attendees, and the time that we're in today is to really realize that technology is really an aiding tool. It's called the fourth industrial revolution because just like industry and factories and transportation and trains and cars really changed our society and the way we operate as humans, technology is really spearheading us into the future and making our life much easier. Instead of fearing it or thinking that a robot will once take over a human and we will no longer exist, it's important to address the skills that we need. How do we reskill ourselves? How do we upskill ourselves? In marketing, for sure, technology has taken over. Digital automation has taken over. The fact that we are having a webinar over Zoom and everybody's getting an automated confirmation email is the prime example of that. But you still need a human to do that. The human needs to have that skill. It's not a robot that's going to do that. But if we don't have that skill, then that human skill set becomes a little bit obsolete. And this is what I focused on my career, is how can I learn about more technologies, newer technologies that are relevant to my field, and also use that in my personal life. I'm sure all of us have referred to a few YouTube videos here and there during this lockdown, between cutting hair and learning how to cook, or maybe some DIY solution at home. But this is really where I stand right now, focusing on this integration. But that was all possible because of continuous studies that were facilitated by online technologies, whether it's social media or artificial intelligence or machine learning, which is relevant to my career right now. But along the way, also, I must say that the soft skills played a very important role, and that's how we grow in an organization as well. It's not enough to just be very technically sound or the best engineer, the best doctor out there. The soft skills are very important, and Simone is the leader really on this, is how do we deal with people? How do we coach? How do we lead them, not just micromanage them? And all these things that are related to our new economy.
Lovely. Thank you, Souha. Amazing to hear more about you and all of that digital prowess that you have. I think it's amazing that we're here today on the webinar together, because we really bring both worlds collide, from the digital tech space of Souha's prowess to the people and the soft skills space of my experience. And when Samar was introducing me earlier, it makes me feel uncomfortable to hear about all of that experience that I have, because there's always something that's not on the bio, isn't there? And what's not on my bio is that I actually left school very, very young. I'm somewhat of a career chameleon, you could say, and I've changed careers and jobs quite a few times, quite a few industries in my life. And I left school young, and I started my first job as a hairdresser, which was actually amazing because it built in me the people skills and the people experience that has led me throughout my career and to where I am today. And I remember my first boss giving me the best advice I've ever had, and that was, Simone, don't talk about yourself. Ask questions of others. Get people talking about themselves when you've got them in the chair as a hairdresser. And so that really developed a lot of skills in me, and the whole upskilling and reskilling part of lifelong learning has been a constant throughout my career. So even when I was a hairdresser, I was fascinated with human behaviour. I was always wanting to learn more. I ended up managing the salon, the business, learning how to run a business. I ended up managing the education program. I ended up traveling the world and working as a hairdresser in London from Australia, from where I was. And all of this brings with it lots of really rich learnings. Eventually, I also learned that education was really important, and I went back to school. And so while I was working part-time, I finished my secondary school, I went to university, I did everything a little bit backwards. And then I continued to skill myself up through a series of short courses, really my whole life. And what I've done is I've just followed my interest and put my hand up for opportunities before I was ready. So eventually, after a successful career in hairdressing and the beauty industry, I went into the corporate world after I finished my university, and that was where I got my first sales job. And that was where I actually excelled in sales by just going to work and trying harder and learning and having my eyes open, and I ended up being the highest performing salesperson in Australia, which then led me to move on to other things, and we ended up coming to the UAE. I headed up a learning and development department. I ended up working in senior leadership roles, and you know, one thing leads to another, and throughout all of that there's been constant upskilling and reskilling and I would say integration of learning along the way.
Thank you, Simone, for that wonderful journey. It just really goes testimony to say that if you follow your path and you have a North Star, you're bound to reach your success, regardless of what, let's say, external boundaries or stories you hear of other people. As long as everybody's conscious of their own story and path, it's very important. We've put together just a little bit on the basics to touch upon really what's the difference between a traditional economy and a gig economy. Essentially, we all graduated, went to work, and had a pretty much linear path to life. The common stories about someone spending 20 to 30 years or their entire career in a company are very common, very much valued. It's not to say that this is not necessarily correct or incorrect. It's just to say that things have really changed. We live in a world now where there's always ongoing change. The biggest testimony to that is your cell phone. You change it every year or you just feel obsolete. And if you don't, every 2 to 3 months, you get a software update. For those of us of the Nokia age and the Motorola age, we probably have the same phone for 3 years. So this goes to say that the speed at which we operate in is very different. It's much faster. Our mindset, which we will explore later on, needs to adapt in a different way. And lucky for all of us that there's a lot of tools for us to access this type of mindset change. But essentially, we go from a let's say linear top-down sort of hierarchy to a gig economy, a sort of business environment. Now, what does that mean? Whether it's a startup or an enterprise, regardless of the industry, there's 3 pillars to this ongoing change that impact all of us on all sorts of lives. And I think also parents and on a social level would attest to that things have really changed. You have a digitization and an integration of digital and tech across the value chain, whether you're in a service industry or a product industry. Your products and offerings are digitized as well, whether it's on a social media or someone signs up via technology. It's not just paper and pen anymore. And the business models have become digitized, and the customer proposition and access has been all facilitated by technology. And of course, that goes into cloud, smart, IoT, all of the big names that we hear about, and all of the pros and cons that we read about in the news. But what this essentially means is that we have to be ready for change. We have to accept that change is a normal. We have to accept also that while we're on a job, within the first 6 months, what we thought was a JD can change. I've had instances where within 6 months, I was doing 3 different jobs. It was still the same title, it was still marketing, but it just really had to jump back and forth between different things. So without a mental agility and flexibility and understanding that this is the new roadmap, it becomes maybe to our own self-created hardship to accommodate and adapt on these things. And the reason why we're really saying that is that the way we think about things is probably the first step towards that upskilling and reskilling. Because the technology is there, the tools are there, the training institutes are there, the coaches, the executive coaches are there, such as Simone. They're all there. But how do we go about it, and how do we think about it, and how we adopt it into our life is what we'd like to take you on that journey together in this webinar. How are you finding that, Simone, with your clients and in your line of work?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, as you say, that the future is it has been largely unpredictable as we know it. But now, of course, that's kind of on steroids, right? The
Yes.
unpredictability of the future has escalated tenfold. And so the need for us to assess where are we going and what's going to be most important to us comes more to the forefront. And it's that intersection between the digital technology and the soft skills mindset space that I believe will unlock a lot of opportunities going forward. So let's explore the mindset a little bit more, shall we?
Yes. That's a very interesting picture. I think if we, for sake of interaction, if we all just pause a little bit and see maybe what that image might convey to us. You know, there's so many different examples from work, from industry, from personal life, from social life, of how we're all very different. We have different personalities, different temperaments, etc. And we have different abilities and strengths. And a lot of times we hear play to your strengths. How do we go about that? There's, I came across a book that was recommended by my family, a member of mine. It's called Mindset 2.0, and it talks about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, just as simple as that. It's two ends of the spectrum and how we do about it. And it really changes everything because, for example, if we take marketing, will social media take over my marketing job? Will big data and machine learning take over the insights we create for customers and how we craft the message? It will not take over the human element of the job. But if I don't know as a working professional how to use that data and how to use the platforms that use that data, then somebody who will take over my job. If I'm in banking and I'm in stock trading, for example, it's not artificial intelligence that's going to take over and the entire trading floor, but it will be there to help. So the trader who knows how to use those platforms will definitely be better off than the trader who's still calculating stock tickers by hand. So it's all of this, but I just really ask us to stop and think and, you know, see what instances in our life, what milestones in our life have we been faced with a forced change on us, either in job scope or in life circumstances or anything like that. And in the next slide, we'll see together how our mindset could either help us make it a smoother forced change or a more difficult change. Right, so here, as you can see, this is really from the book. You have two mindsets, and you know, there's one way. There's very different paradigms that address the fixed mindset or the growth mindset. Some people might refer to it as, you know, either looking at life as the cup half full or half empty. We've heard about victim mentality versus empowering mentality, but essentially what it's really saying is that how to look at different areas of our life with a lens of positivity and empowerment, and understand that we really have all the tools and the power and the will within ourselves to change. So for example, when we look at challenges, do we look at it as a punishment or an opportunity to grow or learn? When we look at obstacles, do we think of creative ways to overcome them with, of course, the right wisdom and knowledge that some might take longer times and different types of effort than others? When we look at energy, are we low on energy, very lethargic, avoidant, or are we energetic and go-getters and we just have a kind of social courage to go out there? When we look at criticism, do we look at it with a discerning eye? Is this source of criticism really trying to help me, or are they trying to put me down, and which one do I take or let go? Or do we just look at that criticism as a major blow and that we should just, you know, stop our life and not go anywhere? And do we look at success of others in terms of they just got lucky? Or do we try to take someone who's successful in a field we want to be successful in and try to study their path? So if you want to be a career coach or an executive coach, you know, Simone's path, for example, do I look at that and be like, oh, I could never be her? Or do I see and try to learn from what she did and try to see what I can apply in my region? So this is more like an infographic to help us all, and it's available online. Just Google mindset, fixed or growth. And it really helps us ask ourselves the really honest, tough questions and see what is really holding us back. And you know, Simone will go through the next following slides a little bit on how we can really frame this for ourselves, because this tends to be the biggest hurdle to growth before anything else.
Absolutely. Thank you, Souha. So yeah, I mean, the growth mindset is really enabled by curiosity. And I think it's the concept of perpetual expansion and understanding that there is more available to us that we're not tapping into yet. So I love the term "not yet." It means we're just not there yet, but there's the potential to be there, and the strive and the yearning to be there. So not yet is a nice way of telling ourselves that we have a growth mindset. And the other way to sort of connect that in is, I use this model a lot in my coaching, in the early stages of coaching, and some of you might have come across it before because it's been around for a while and it's very simple and popular to understand, and that's why I love it, because it's really very practical. But you can ask yourself, in order to have a growth mindset, which of these zones of awareness do I need to be in? So you've got the first zone of awareness, which is in the center there, which is your zone of comfort, your comfort zone. And we all know that there is no growth, no learning in our comfort zone. So if we tend to stay there, then we are limiting our own potential. And we're certainly maybe erring on the side of having a fixed mindset than a growth mindset. And then in the middle section, we have the learning zone. And this is ideally where we want to stay. We want to stay always in the learning zone, in a perpetual state of curiosity, asking people questions rather than talking at them, and really understanding what can I learn from every situation that I go through. And even if the situation was not desirable, there's always learning that I can take forward with me. And then in the outer ring, we have the stress zone. And this is where our learning actually gets shut down. So if we stay too long in the stress zone, then we're really not doing ourselves any favors. We're doing ourselves a disservice. So the goal is to be in the learning zone as much as we can, and to really ask ourselves, what is it that I need to get back to the learning zone? Because it's not possible for us to stay there all the time. We will all retreat, creatures of habit, back to our comfort zone, because that's our safe place. And we will all get overstretched, even sometimes due to external factors, into our stress zone. So I like to use this as like a ready reckoner, and I use it as a tool to calibrate for myself all the time. Where am I now? Where do I want to be? And what do I need in order to make that shift? And just these micro shifts and these conversations with ourselves that can help us to really make sure that we stay in that learning zone, because that's where the magic is. And the learning zone can be uncomfortable because we're out of our comfort zone. So it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to feel uncomfortable about learning and to be a little bit out of our depth, as long as we haven't transversed that line into a really stressful situation. I love this image. Some of you might recognize it. It's the statue of Fearless Girl from New York, and it is a feature there just near the stock exchange in New York. And what does it depict? I mean, it depicts a girl with her hands on her hips and a raging bull right in front of her, and the caption is Fearless Girl. So it's basically saying, don't mess with me because I'm going places. And why I chose to share this image with you is really, it's related to mindset, and it's related to the attitude that we have, and we have to embrace that can-do attitude. And in my experience with coaching, executive coaching, especially when I'm coaching executive female leaders of any level, even at the most senior level, sometimes the inner voice is what gets in our way. And so understanding that we need to take some measured risk in order to keep moving forward and to stay in that learning zone where we feel a bit uncomfortable, we feel the fear and we do it anyway. We take action rather than looking for perfection. Perfectionism is something that really limits particularly female leaders. It comes from a place of being really conscientious and really diligent and wanting to do an amazing job, and that is fantastic, but not to the detriment of our continual progress. So taking measured risks, being that fearless girl, staying in the learning zone, and putting your hand up for stretch assignments, I think is really important. Don't wait until you feel ready to move forward. Just, particularly in the earlier years of your career, put your hand up for many different things. And if you feel you're not experienced and you feel fearful about that, then do it anyway. That's really the message here.
That's wonderful, Simone, and thank you for really capping that, because a lot of the times, we've been talking about this even before this webinar, is, you know, how do I start? There's a little bit of apprehension of starting, or like you said, I don't want to put my hands up for something, whether it's between me and myself or between me and my colleagues and my managers, just out of particular apprehension that what if they find out I don't know everything. The reality of the situation is nobody knows everything, and nobody can learn everything in one go. So that's why having an ongoing approach to our learning and a lifelong learning mindset is what's really going to keep adding to that knowledge and keep that incremental trajectory going for us. When we do that, whenever we have an interruption, such as the one we're all experiencing right now, its impact is a little bit less, if not more, very much less than other people who are not prepared. So here's a learning matrix from Harvard Business Review that I like to use a lot for me and for teams that I manage, is just to really try to map things out. There's the beauty about the economy that we're in right now, that's based on technology, data, and free access to internet, is that it has democratized learning. We can start on any day, at any hour, in any location. If you have a phone, you can do that. If you have a laptop, you can do that. If you have an iPad, you can do that. Some people, they even have the iPad, affixed on their kitchen. So you could even learn while doing something, cooking or eating or whatever. But with that also comes a drinking from the fire hose syndrome, is that there's so much out there. What do we do? And let's take a current example during the times that we're in. We log into LinkedIn and you see a lot of people either struggling to find new jobs, and you find a lot of other people that are just posting one certificate after the other, as if it's a race against everybody else. So it's very important to understand that this path is very unique to you. And it's very rewarding to you. Yes, there are external factors that play a role, but as long as we're true to our integrity and we're clear about where we want to go, these external inputs would sway us very much less. So let's take a look at how we can approach this. There's different type of learning, and we'll go into the tools and resources in a little bit, whether it's a soft skill or a technical skill. And there's the learning and there's the experience. So if we say there's very time-consuming topics that to acquire, some of them are very useful and some of them are not useful. There's also the not so time-consuming to acquire sort of learning topics. Some of them are also not useful and some of them are very useful. So what does that really mean? If I'm in marketing, there's over maybe 100 subspecializations to go there. It's not just PR, events, advertising, communications anymore. Under each one of them, there's a huge technical suite and stack, as we'd like to call it, that we can focus on. In my example, for sake of demonstration, I'm in content, social media, and digital tech. I need to know a little bit about SEO. Sorry, Samar, if we can just go back to the first slide. Yeah. I need to know about search engine optimization and machine learning, but I don't need to be the expert on it. So here, it's not time consuming, okay? It's a little bit useful, but not so very useful, so I could browse upon it. But where I really should focus is on the plan and learn quadrant. So time consuming to acquire and very useful are new learning, blended learning modalities like micromasters. You don't need to do the full masters, but you could really specialize in a niche, okay? such as social media marketing, digital media marketing, e-commerce, etc. But they do take a significant amount of time to finish. So here I need to plan them as if I'm planning a bit of university or vocational training courses, but I have the flexibility of my own time. If something is very useful but not too time consuming to acquire, I need to learn it, okay? And this would be, for example, up-to-date news, other short courses that can be done in 1 or 2 hours, for example. I could just really go through it and learn it. But it does help me follow my path, and it helps helps me achieve my goals that I have in my career, and they're relevant to my field. My PR colleagues, for example, will look at very different things also in tech. Financiers would look very different for different tools, etc. So this matrix applies to everybody. It also applies to corporates and companies on a bigger scale, but we can really use this to help ourselves navigate these waters. So with that, we go into what technical skills we might really need to look at. Just before I go into this slide, it's very important to just say one thing. Regardless of the industry that we work in, a doctor, an engineer, financier, someone doing admin work, creative work, anything, it's important that we have the basics and bedrocks of technology mapped out. So it's not just about internet and Microsoft Office and email. LinkedIn has some really great refresher courses on networking, negotiating, how to present your CV, but it's also important to understand how does social media work and how does search work. There's a lot of basic level certifications on Google Garage that are for free. A lot of you will ask, why do I really need this? I'm not using it directly. It's become more and more important today that regardless of the industry or the organization we work in, when we understand how the ecosystem works with digital tools, we're better able to add value across the value chain and remain much more relevant to our employers, or if we own our own businesses, to really be able to scale up and lead our teams across different functions. I personally read about design thinking. It's not really my direct line of work, but I need to understand how it works, the people that I work with, so that we can lead and integrate with each other. Now teams are no longer able to survive if they work in the silos that they used to work in before and protect all the information, just keep it in one vertical. We really need to be able to collaborate. So having that basic broad knowledge of digital, social, technology, value chain, it could be even for a CEO of a manufacturing company, tech is influencing the manufacturing and factory process. So this is just a little bit of a segue. Also relevant to the tools that we choose and the courses we want to learn and the topics that are of interest and benefit to us, it's also to understand the difference between what's accredited and what's certified, and what's not accredited and not certified. And between those two, we have it here on the y-axis, you have the free option and the paid option. So let's take an example, okay? Right now we're on a webinar, we're learning something. It's not accredited, it's not certified, and it's free, but it's beneficial as a stepping stone, or a TEDx article, or a podcast, or an online network, or an article. Now, depending on where we want to go, we have free accredited and certified, such as things on LinkedIn Learning across the board, soft skills, technical skills. We've seen a lot of people post their certificates online. We have Google Garage, such as the fundamentals of digital marketing. Almost everybody's taking that. Mainly, I'm seeing it on my network that are outside the marketing field. And there's something called Google Skill Shop, which a lot of entrepreneurs are also venturing into because it talks about AdWords and how to advertise a business online and how to register that business online and try to benefit from it. So it works for all types of businesses. So here you get a certificate of completion, but it's not necessarily an accredited certificate of completion. It's recognized by employers or by the professional community as a proof of completion, but it's not necessarily accredited. If we go to the paid and accredited, the top right, you have your Udemy, Udacity, Coursera platforms to choose from. You have certain vocational academies such as Microsoft and Google and Astrolabs and other areas. You also have edX and Opencourseware. Why is this important? On edX, they've partnered with all the Ivy League schools where they really have either MicroMasters or specific courses that literally take 4 to 5 months sometimes to finish, but it's a self-study You pay for these courses, but they're also accredited because you gain credit hours that can go into another MicroMasters or a full-on master's program that can convert later on. So here it's different because there's a educational accreditation assigned to it as well. Opencourseware operates a little bit at the same thing. We know in the last quarter, all the Ivy Leagues from Yale to Harvard has also offered their courses for free for everybody to watch and learn. And if you require or would like to have a certificate to prove your completion, you pay about $100 to $200. So some of them will tell you this is a credit-bearing course that you could convert into another program. So here, there's really the difference. And last but definitely not least, you have the books and the audiobooks and the workshops that we pay for, but they're not necessarily certified. Seminars, professional coaching is very important. It demonstrates that you've worked on yourself, but it might not really convert into a master's degree or other type of certification if you require one. But nonetheless, they're very important because they add to our depth of knowledge and our wealth. So this is how we can look at these resources. And again, just to wrap it up on technical skills, regardless of the field, it's very important to have the basics of technology, communication, and automation. And then you could focus a little bit more within your field of study on the relevant technologies that impact your direct work.
Amazing. It's amazing to see how much is actually on offer when it's all comprehensively brought together.
Absolutely,
like
yeah. There's a lot, really, yeah.
Really a lot, amazing. And I think, again, that crossroad between the intersection of digital skills and soft skills is what is going to really future-proof careers for tomorrow. So let's take a look at the top 5 soft skills that are in demand. This is also according to LinkedIn Learning, and these are touted as these skills that if you focus on, then they're going to open up the world of work for you for tomorrow. And the top one is actually creativity. So creativity, we think about it from the perspective of creativity of thought. You know, how is that useful? It's useful for problem solving. It's useful for innovation, for moving us forward. And I think, you know, it's really, I've heard a quote from Sir Ken Robinson, who does those lovely TED Talks about education and how creativity is not so nurtured within the education space. And he basically says that creativity is as important in education today for children as literacy. And I tend to agree with that. So for creativity, well, I'll share with you what they are one by one, and then I'll come back and tell you how you can work on them a little bit. The second one is persuasion, communication, basically, and becoming a more persuasive individual. And the third one is collaboration and learning to work effectively within a team environment. This is going to become really, really critical. I think it's already been put to the test through the COVID situation where, you know, team collaboration and working remotely, again, the intersection between digital and human has been really put to the test. Adaptability is in there at number 4, and our emotional intelligence, which comprises of a number of things. So if we take them one by one and we take creativity first, I think creativity is something that is difficult to learn. I think what sustains and nurtures creativity is actually doing less. So consider this as a way of developing yourself. Sometimes we think, oh, if we want to develop a certain skill, we need to do more. I would challenge that with creativity, sometimes we need to do less. Sometimes we haven't got enough space in our life to actually stop and smell the roses and really notice what's going on around us and really appreciate the beauty of what is around us. You know, I had some major breakthroughs when I was going through a career change to become an executive coach. And part of becoming an executive coach is that you have to do a lot of inner work and a lot of personal transformation. And so I took some time off. I took a big step back from my career to evaluate and create that space for my own sort of creativity and authenticity to come through. And I used to sit with my children on the floor and just play with them and observe them. And I had some major breakthroughs creatively in that time. I generated a lot of new ideas. I was inspired by the way I saw them operate in the world. And So I think sometimes going back to basics is a really nice thing to do. And I know of a lot of examples through COVID as well, where people have invested their time into creative pursuits that maybe they were in touch with when they were younger, but they've lost touch with as they've become busier and busier in their adult life. You know, taking up something like painting, which, you know, it's a really reflective process, and it helps us to transfer the creative skill of painting to what we do on a daily basis for a job. Not to say that we're going to paint in that job, but just to say our creative thought juices will be provoked. Yeah. So creativity, do less is really my tip there. Persuasion, I think in order to become an effective persuader of other people, we need to first be able to be convincing within ourselves. So I believe that there's a lot of inner work to be done here, because quite often our own ability to persuade other people will not be effective unless we truly believe in our own ability. So there's a resource here that I love, which is called Playing Big by Tara Moore. And this book is like a coach in a book, if you like. And it's all about tapping into your inner mentor and overcoming your inner critic. Because we all have that voice inside our head that tells us maybe we're not ready, maybe we're not good enough, and that talks us out of situations before we can talk other people into doing things that we want. So I think there's a lot of inner work to be done, and I highly recommend Playing Big by Tara Moore. It's also got a lot of activities and exercises in it, so I look for resources that are really practical and that teach you how to do something rather than just be theoretical. The third one, collaboration. I think in order to be an effective collaborator, we really need to understand firstly, what are our own strengths? And it is my belief, and certainly my experience in coaching, that people don't take the time to really identify what their strengths are. They may think they know what their strengths are, but they really haven't focused on it enough. So an exercise that I recommend you can all do, which requires no investment, is to do some reflection every evening before you go to bed. There's a piece of paper and you can draw a column, two columns, one with de-energizers on the left-hand side and one with energizers on the right-hand side. And at the end of each day, you can capture what has de-energized me in my day today and what has energized me. And you can think of it from a work perspective, a personal perspective, whatever the case may be, look for what gives you energy. Because what gives you energy is going to be aligned to your strengths. And if you can do that on a daily basis for a couple of weeks only, you'll start to see patterns on a daily basis. Oh, I felt really good. I felt really like that was feeding my spirit and energizing me when I did this task. But when I went to do this other thing that I have to do for my job, oh, I felt tired, I procrastinated, you know, I went and made another cup of tea, I started to feel really lethargic. And so you start to notice these patterns for yourself. So if you can spend time identifying your energizers, that will give you immediate information around what are your strengths. And when you know your strengths, then you know that's where you should put all of your energy. And in order to be an effective team, you need to collaborate with other people that are good at what you're not. So I'm no good at the digital space. That is not my forte. I'm a people expert. So I partner up with Souha because she's the digital person, you know. So opposites can help each other. Differences add value, and collaborating with people that are very different to you in terms of their strengths will make you a power force to be reckoned with. And then we have adaptability. So to be adaptable, I mean, there's no surprises there. Of course, it's a very fast-paced world and there's a lot of pressure on us to flex. Like Souha mentioned earlier, the example of your JD changing and all of a sudden you need to do the work of 3 people instead of the work of 1 person, or maybe the job role that you were hired for is no longer exactly what the organization needs. And in order to sustain your job, you need to just be flexible, right? So for me, adaptability is all about creating new habits. And creating new habits is something that we need to do throughout life. I talk a lot about the different seasons that we have in our career, and different seasons require different things from us. So the resource I recommend here is called Atomic Habits by James Clear. And this is all about the principle of we don't need to make huge leaps. We don't need to make big, bold leaps of faith in order to create new habits in our life. It's quite the opposite. We need to just make very small incremental changes. It's called 1%. So if you can change 1% around the way that you do something, then you can build a new habit over time, and you can evolve your behavior to reorient towards where you're going in your career. So it's these small little pivots that you do that add up to big change. It's not taking the big leap in the first place. And I think the more we can recognize that, the more we can nurture our adaptability muscle, if you like. And I found Atomic Habits again to be a really practical advice. It's got some great exercises in there, and immediately you start to think, oh, I can do this. You know, it doesn't seem like such a big obstacle. And then finally, our emotional intelligence. I mean, this is a big one. Our emotional intelligence actually peaks when we're around 50 years of age. So the good news for those that are more mature amongst us is we might be nearly there. But the good news for those that are in the younger generation, you can accelerate it, you can fast track it. So where it starts is, you know, there's 4 quadrants within the typical framework of emotional intelligence, which is the most well-known one from Daniel Goleman, which is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social management. So in order to develop our emotional intelligence and fast track it, start with self-awareness, because all behavioural change journeys and all changes that we want to make within our soft skill development, within our inner work, is within the self-awareness realm. So how can we do that is really very, very simple. I encourage people to always ask for feedback and just really listen to the feedback. And of course, our resistance goes up if the feedback is not something that we're comfortable with. Remember, we're now in the learning zone. It feels uncomfortable. So accept the feedback whether you resonate with it or not, and just let it sit. Because feedback is really the gift. Feedback is where our awareness will expand. And in order to keep evolving through the changes that are necessary through our career, we have to keep working on our self-awareness. And I think the sooner we can do that in life, the better. We don't need to wait until that peak when we're 50 years old. Yes, so as Souha mentioned earlier, there is a lot of providers of either low cost or free courses that you can tap into. So what I have done here is just put together a table with those top 5 soft skills: creativity, persuasion, collaboration, adaptability, and EQ, and what is available on LinkedIn, Coursera, Udemy, and edX. So as you can see, there's a lot, you know. So I mean, you really have to identify what it is that you want to work on, because my other recommendation is don't do everything all at once. Choose 1 or 2 things that you want to focus on and master them. Yeah? So do it well, give it your attention, give it your focus, and then move on to the next thing. I think what I see with ambitious women is that we have a hunger and we have an appetite for doing a lot, and sometimes we take on too much as well, and that can be both a blessing and a curse, because you can spread yourself too thin. So I think in order to master things, just take it 1 step at a time, and don't overwhelm yourself, and keep space for things that are unplanned, because they always come. And this is where we have a tendency to become overwhelmed too quickly, because we don't keep enough space in our life as well. And my final piece of advice is really, again, something I come across when I'm coaching particularly female leaders, and it is that we have a tendency to take the responsibility of a lot of different things onto our own shoulders and take our development path on our own. And I don't think that this is necessarily the right approach. I think it should be a shared responsibility. There are resources all around us, and we need to be accepting of the help that we need in order to move forward. So I encourage everybody to consider who is in your boat, who is your support crew. So you are the driver of the boat, and you need to own your career development and take it on board. But at the same time, you need to invite others into your boat to help you get there. So courses is one way, colleagues and friends can help you, coaches of course can help you, and the final thing here is about mentorship. So we are going to be partnering with She is Arab on another webinar coming up on the 1st of June, which is all about mentorship and the value of mentorship. And myself and my business partner from the Ameliorate group, Melissa Schlim, we are the chief mentoring advocates of the Link mentoring program, which is a no-cost 9-month mentoring program, which is available to all women looking for a mentor to support their career growth. So don't do it alone, ladies. There is a lot of support out there.
Thank you so much, Simone, for that. And I think it's a great topic to end this amazing presentation with, because I really truly believe that mentorship was such personally an important part of my journey. And I would highly recommend it for all of our network members, for anyone out there really who's looking to develop. And one should look for a mentor, not even necessarily from the same field. You could learn from people from different fields. I mean, especially if you have an interest in that topic. We can't wait for the session that we will have with you ladies on the 21st to share more about that topic. So thank you so much. We have just a couple of questions, but I was wondering first if you can briefly reflect on the fact that everything now is happening online, like coaching is happening online, training is happening online. In a way, I mean, personally, and I know a lot of people who are feeling super pressured with everything taking place without this physical contact. How do we make our choices within this dearth of courses and webinars, and you have shared so many resources, both you and Souha, about what to develop in terms of technical skills and soft skills. But how do we really pick and choose, and how do we manage our time amidst this chaos that's happening around us at the moment?
My suggestion is really to follow your interest. There is so much value. It's a little bit connected to the energizers and the de-energizers that I was talking about earlier. So if you understand what gives you energy and you focus on that, then learning is not a chore. Working is not a chore when you're really in that moment, in that flow of loving what you do. And so that would be my encouragement to everybody, to follow what your interest is, let go of obligation and what you think you should do or what you should learn, and really go with what interests you.
Wonderful. And on that note as well, can you also share a little bit more about the zones diagram that you had shared with us? Because I feel so many of us are now stuck in the stress zone. Even if there's an interest in learning or so on, there's this pressure at the moment. We're being pulled without feeling it. And obviously it's perfectly fine and it's perfectly normal to acknowledge such feelings of stress and to take it one day at a time and so on. But really, what are the tools that can help us move from the stress zone and back within, I wouldn't want to say the comfort zone, because then there's no learning and development there, but really take us back into that. I'd love to hear both your reflections on this. So Simone, you can start, please.
Okay. I mean, I always like to say that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So if you're in the stress zone, you're overwhelmed and you're releasing all of these lovely stress hormones, cortisol and everything, which is really shutting down your thinking and shutting down your learning. So how to get back to the learning zone is you have to put your own self-care and your own needs first. You have to restore, do some restorative and regenerative things that are going to let out a little calmness. So I think, again, it's that yin and yang of, you know, we're ambitious women, we want to get it right, there's so much on offer, and so it's like, let me at it kind of thing. But at the same time, we need to balance that with, well, self-care and really making sure that sometimes less is more.
What about you, Souha? Actually, Archana just sent in a comment on the same note saying that after a career break for family, how can one move from comfort zone to learning zone? So I guess that's struggle as well for mothers or who want to go back, you know, who want to get out of that zone and back into the learning zone. Tell us your tips.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this question, Sam. It's very important. And like Simone said, it starts with a bit of self-care. And it all starts also with self-awareness. So if I were to share my experience, for example, I know that I'm very much into technology and social, and, you know, pretty much my day hours revolve around that. But I'm also first and foremost a human. So I have my needs. And that means my eyes need rest because they're a muscle. When we learn online, we have to just be mindful of the reality of the situation and try not to really put ourselves down. So on that aspect of self-care, it also requires a little bit of discipline to say no, and to say that, you know, by 8 o'clock, it's my no tech zone. This is when I turn off everything, and maybe I go back to reading a book, or I just zone out, or I put a meditation music on YouTube and I just practice 10 minutes of mindfulness. Or maybe none of that and I just go walk outside in nature and I don't want any of that. So it's important to plug out first before plugging in, because yes, we are all in the stress zone. The media, which we're all following, is also a part of that reality, and we are affected by that regardless of how impermeable we think we are. So it's important to really plug out and to put time limits on everything, just so that things really just don't get out of hands. And I mean, unless someone has a toddler and things like that, you know, for the adults around us, they could really run themselves. So it's about delegating what you can delegate, plugging out, taking care of yourself. And honestly, I would say the most important one for me, and I hope it works for a lot of people, you have to have a tech off and tech on time. And you have to manage your...
That's an amazing tip, Souha. Do you actually do that? Do you actually disconnect?
Look, in the morning, actually, when I sleep, I put my phone on silent and I put it away, and I have an analog alarm clock in my room. Analog, not even digital. This is how I plug out. Tonight, or there's a cutoff time every day that's consistent for me, because that's how my system works. I like to have certain things that are stabilized and consistent in order to manage all the revolving agile things that happen around my life and my career and everything around that. So I do plug out. Now, there are certain situations where, yes, I have to stay later, I have to deliver, etc. That's on a case-by-case basis. But if it becomes every day, it's not necessarily a healthy thing. And I would really say, just, I'm not a health expert, but do drink a lot of water and keep yourself healthy, because we need to do that. So it's just really taking care of our mind and body first and foremost, and however spiritual sides that we have, plugging out. And in the morning, I don't check my phone. Nothing's going to happen. Honestly, that half an hour in the morning, and Summer, you know, and Simone, you know now that my coffee is very important. So this is the me time. This is how I like to pamper myself. Everybody has their routine. So this is on the, let's say, psychological side of things, so that there's that mental space. And also prioritization. So yes, I would love to, let's say, put half an hour to an hour every day of learning, but is it sustainable? Not really, because things really change. So everybody's aware of their schedule. So this takes me to the next point. What's good about, we've said how online learning and screen time can really cause us a lot of fatigue, not just psychologically, but physically. Our eyes get tired, our sleep is affected. There's a lot of blue light. Yes, this is true. And there's a lot of things you can do about that. But when it comes to learning online, what's nice right now is that you could pause, leave, and come back where you stopped. All these programs that we spoke about, they're also in bite-sized nuggets. So I remember in college, there was a class that was literally 2.5 hours with 200 people in it. I used to just write notes to remember what's happening. It was just impossible to focus. Right. Now, even the most challenging course I'm taking online, each video is 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes, and I can play it fast and I can play it slow and I can repeat and I can look at the transcript and I can just go around it and talk to my colleagues on the chat forum. So I'm just going a little bit into the tools here just to really realize that it's very accessible. It's snack-sized learning, I think, is the new name of the game for us to keep continually learning. And even books, if I read 1 page every day, it's better than reading 200 pages once a year, because the muscle, the brain muscle needs to remain moving, but not overworked. It's like going to the gym. You don't lift 100 kilograms in the beginning. You start maybe with some walking, right. 1 kilogram, and then you just move it up. As long as we keep walking, it's fine. There was a question by the lady you mentioned also as well, Samar.
Yes.
How to get back. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
There's a lot of platforms that are helping women now to just really get back into the workforce and re-find and recalibrate their skill sets. And what I've seen in companies on the company side is that there's a lot of change in the HR approach. Before, it was, why is there a career gap, as if it was a negative thing. But in the last 3 to 4 years, even when I get interviewed, it's different. Nobody's looking to have 10 years in one company. They're looking to see, do you really add value for as long as we need you to add value? So in a way, it's a catch-22, but somebody returning to work after any form of sabbatical could probably use that as an entry point for negotiation.
Right. No, I think that's a very helpful tip. I know we've run out of time, but I just wanted to say very quickly to ask you, Simone, if you can share just a couple of reflections on a topic we addressed offline previously, which is a step that really precedes all of these, these investments in your technical and soft skills development, which is really knowing where you're going. Having sort of a target ahead of you, identifying really what are your aspirations, where is it that you want to go, and then you can obviously decide accordingly what you want to do to get there. What does this take? How do we, go into this phase of self-understanding and identifying this target, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole webinar in itself in terms of it's a very individual process, because what success looks like for me is very different to what success looks like for you. So that's a great place to start. Ask yourself the question, what does success look like to me in X period of time? And what are you willing to plan for? I mean, sometimes it's difficult in these expatriate situations whereby we don't really know maybe what next year brings or what next month brings, right? So I would say choose a time frame that you're aiming for and ask yourself, what does success look like? Where do I want to be by the end of this time frame? And then you have at least a goal, a measure to work towards.
I think with that, that's a great point to wrap up with. So I'd like to thank you ladies so much for your time today. I think this was very helpful, especially with the lists of all these resources we can go back to and work really on developing ourselves and upskilling for what's yet to come. Thank you so very much. And with that, I'd like to thank everyone who joined us today and end this webinar. Thank you very, very much, ladies. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Simone. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.